and you check the content of this last session, you will see that what we are doing today, in a way, is three sessions in one. What was planned for 3 sessions, we are going to do it in one. That means that we'll have to look at the general ideas about meta rules and the strings of rules, and the case study will be quite brief, but I think you will get the idea anyways. So it's always, you can go deep or not, but the main ideas will be clear, I hope. So we will see first the meta rules, and that means the paribhashas that we mentioned the first day. Among these meta rules, there are some rules, some paribhashas that are called, I call mega rules. That's because in Pali they are called mahasuttas. And then there's another type of paribhashas or meta rules that I call ghost meta rules. That word does not appear in Pali, but you will see why I use this term. Then the second part of today's session will be about Rupa Siddhi. What does Rupa Siddhi mean? Apart from the title of one of the most eminent or famous grammars, it actually means the completion, the formation of the form. That means the word form. And that is done by progressing through a string of suttas or a string of rules in a process of derivation. Finally, in the third part, we'll do a case study very briefly. And for that, I'm going to refer to an article that I wrote or I published last year that is already on Google Drive for you to read it if you are interested, or you can have it anyway. So we start with the first part, meta rules, mega rules, and ghost rules. As you remember from the first session, probably there are 4 main types of suttas or rules. The sanya, or technical term, the adhikara, that expresses a domain where the rules will operate. Then there are paribhasa rules, that means meta rules. And finally, we have vidhi rules or operation rules. Today, we are going to look at paribhasa rules first. These are very important because in some books, you will see that they are explained as interpretation rules. So these are rules that help us to operate with the operations. Sorry about the redundancy. So the term paribhasa is formed with in 2 parts, pari and bhasa. Pari means around, or even can mean beyond, like Greek meta. And bhasa means literally speech, but so the meaning would be meta speech or meta language. But in this case, because we are working on grammar, we just call it meta language, meta grammatical language. That's a rule that is a meta rule for the grammar. It's a meta linguistic rule. It's a rule about the rules. These rules are actually something common in normal cognitive situations. We all know and use many paribhasas in our daily life, or when we use books and academic works especially. For instance, we know that dictionaries and indexes or indices, they follow the alphabetical order. So that is not something that the dictionary itself, if you start looking at the entries, the entries will never tell you, except maybe if there is an entry that says what is a dictionary, but for letting that aside, the entries of the dictionary will not tell you how to read the dictionary itself. So probably there will be some indication in the introduction that will tell you how to do that, and probably will tell you which alphabetical order, whether it's the Western or any other one, etc. So these are what paribhasas are. Now the question could arise here, like why not having a paribhasa, a meta rule, that will tell us how to interpret the other paribhasa, and then we would need another paribhasa to tell us how to interpret the previous paribhasa, and so on, until we would reach the most general and universal paribhasa that will tell us how to understand all the rest. So that would be a plausible question, but that's not so, because that's not how it works really. Because the paribhasa is not something that is floating in the void, is not something totally separate from the suttas, from the operations. And it is meaningful, the meaning of the paribhasa itself is there only if it helps to produce the expected form of the language. It's a form that speakers already know, or in the case of Pali, it's a form that the Tipitaka already contains, so it's something already given. And the paribhasa is as much theory, so a theory of interpretation, as it is practiced, because it's something that it needs to be applied together with an operation. So in some commentaries, like the Kaccāyana Sutta Nirdesa of Chapata Saddhamma Chotipala, 3 different types of paribhasas are distinguished. And see that here he distinguishes between Sanyanga, Vidyanga, and Anyanga. This distinction is, or this classification is not very common. Actually, I just remembered it when I was preparing the slides. I didn't remember that there was this threefold classification of paribhasas, but it's there. And what's more important here, in my opinion, is the fact that he calls these paribhasas angas. And anga, I translate it quite literally, limb, the limb or a part, or it could mean an auxiliary rule, an assisting rule, and it always goes with another type of rule. For instance, the first type, sanyanga, it's a limb of a definition. It's a limb of a sanya. As an example, you can see Kaccāyana 9, that we have seen already and we'll see later, parasamanya payoge. So this is a paribhasa rule that it has to be taken as a limb or as a part, or subordinated, if you wish, to the definitions, to the sanyas. Similarly with Vidyanga, that's a limb of an operation rule, and Anyanga that applies to the rest. So here you can see how even in the tradition, the paribhasas are not taken as something external to the system, but it's a kind of mechanism within the system to learn how to use the operations and the definitions, etc. Now we can see a few examples of paribhasas to get an idea of how they look like and what they are for. Some of them we've already seen, but we will simply refresh. Very famous paribhasa that we have seen already is parasamanya payoge, which means something like the technical terms of the others may be used whenever they apply. That means whenever you find the word in Kaccāyana, a technical term that is not defined in the Kaccāyana itself, you have to understand that the definition given in the Sanskrit books applies. This is a general term. When there is a situation that is in doubt, so to say, or when we don't know what to do with that technical term, this paribhasa will provide the solution. That means, don't worry, go to the Sanskrit books, and that's where you are going to find the definition. This is the meaning of this paribhasa. So as you see, it's not telling us what to do exactly and how to form a word, but without this rule, we couldn't understand other rules that are actually telling us how to form and derive Pali words. Another important paribhasa, the Kaccāyana number 10, that goes with number 11, as we will see. And these are 2 rules that we couldn't see last day, but we are seeing them today. That belongs to the first chapter of the Kaccāyana, Sandhi 1. And Kaccāyana 10 says, Pubbam adottitam asaram sarena biyojaje. This rule, it's interesting for many reasons, and one of them, as you can see from the translation, is that it seems to refer to writing practices. The meaning would be something like the preceding sound, what is preceding, which is placed below and having no vowel, should be separated from the vowel. That means the consonant should be separated from the vowel. And because that's in the context of sandhi, that we understand that is when we are trying to produce sandhis or to operate with sandhis and vowel coalition and so on. And Kaccāyana 11 is the counterpart of the previous rule and says naye paranyutte. One should bring again the following sound, the sound that follows, when applicable. So after the process of sandhi, if possible or if applicable, then you have to put together the sounds again, the sounds that you have separated according to Kaccāyana 10. Now let's see how this works according to the tradition. On the top you have the 2 rules, the 2 paribhasas that go together, and here we can see the example, tatra ayam. So the first thing we do according to Kaccāyana 10 is to separate the previous one, to separate the consonant or the syllable tr from its vowel that follows, which is a. The vowel is considered to be on the top, above, and the consonant is considered to be below. Maybe that reflects some writing system in which the vowels are put on the top of the consonant. It does happen with vowels e and e or I, but not with all of them. In any case, this is what we do according to Kaccāyana 10. We separate the vowel A from its consonant, and then we just have A and then ayam. So these two vowels are meeting, A plus A. First step, separate consonant from vowel. Now we apply the operation, the rule that we have seen last day, sara, sare, lopam. So before a vowel is elided. So the first A is elided according to Kaccāyana 12, if you remember. Otherwise, you can check last day's session. Then according to Kaccāyana 15, which was also mentioned last day, which is a very simple rule, which says digam, means after the deletion has been done, after the elision has been done, then the remaining vowel may become long. So in this case, it does become long, it's lengthened, and then we have tatr plus ayam. And mind that the words are still separated because we have separated it before. And finally, by Kaccāyana 11, we can put again together the following vowel with the preceding consonant, and we obtain the form tatrayam, which is the normal sandhi that we will find in the Pali literature. So this is how it is explained, and you can see how rules 10 and 11 somehow are making kind of pins from both sides, from top and bottom, and they are explaining us how to proceed with the rules of sandhi that are operations. Another example of paribhasa is Kaccāyana 51, which is at the end of the sandhi section, and says anupadittanam vutta yogato. That means the sandhi of those forms that have not been taught should be carried out according to the rule, that means according to the yoga, that has been taught, i.e. stated, or literally stated. So that means that following the same system that has been taught in the sandhi section, we can actually produce as many sandhi forms as we wish, always following the same system, the same yoga. So this is a rule that will provide for many different cases, which are not literally or explicitly found in the Kaccāyana. One note that you can see below is that a commentary like the Kaccāyana Nirdesa does not consider this rule as a paribhasa, but as a vidhi sutta, as an operation, because in a way it's telling us that we have to do some operations. But I understand it's a paribhasa because it's providing for extra forms through a method of interpretation. Another important paribhasa is lingancha nipacchate, Kaccāyana 53, which is, as you can see in the translation, is to be read with Kaccāyana 51 by Anuvrutti. I think at this point we all know what Anuvrutti is, this recurrence of preceding information. So the complete meaning of this rule would be, and the nominal base is formed following the words of the conqueror. That means following the words of the Buddha, i.e. following the words that we find in the Tipitaka. That means that the nominal bases that we will be using in the grammar are based on the language of the Tipitaka. This is again a paribhasa that specifies what kind of nouns are we going to discuss in this grammar. Another example, Kaccāyana 434. I'm always using the Olipin's numeration. If you are checking the Burmese edition, it's always at some point after 279, I think, or something like this. I think it's two rules before. So probably Burmese edition here will be 432. It's Dhatu Lingehi Para Pachaya. We have seen this rule already. We didn't discuss it deeply, but the meaning is that affixes, pachayas, are added after verbal roots, dhatus, and nominal bases. So again, this is a paribhasa. It's a meta rule that is telling us how the other rules about affixation are going to be implemented. So when we are saying that certain affix applies to a certain dhatu or verbal root, that means after the dhatu, not before, not in the middle, but after. And this rule applies to any pachaya. Having seen some general or basic paribhasas, now we can see the mega rules or the great rules, the Mahasuttas. The Mahasuttas or mega rules are 4 rules that are invoked in order to derive forms that cannot be derived otherwise. So basically they provide for exceptional cases. You can see that where the grammar cannot arrive, then we design some certain rules that can can be used to explain as exceptions or as irregularities other forms. If we follow the sequence of rules in the Kaccāyana, the first Mahasutta that we find is a rule that, again, we have seen in some discussions in this course. It's Yadanupapanna Nipatana Sijjanti. So this rule means those words that are not formed by the suttas should be formed as irregular forms. So basically, it's telling us that whatever cannot be formed, whatever is found in the Tipitaka, but cannot be formed according to the rules that have been taught in the Kaccāyana, these rules need to be understood as nipatas or indeclinable, so to say, as words that are already given as irregular forms, and basically then no problem. You take them as nipatas and that's it. The word nipatana that you can see here, nipatana sijjanti, the word nipatana is already found in the Sanskrit tradition. That's probably where it comes from in the Kaccāyana. And as you can see from this definition given in the very good dictionary of Sanskrit grammar by Abhyankar, nipatana is a word given as it appears without trying for its derivation. So the derivation is somehow impossible. And you can see in orange color, there is a kind of paribhasa in Sanskrit that appears in the Sanskrit commentaries on Panini, which says nipatanat siddham. So it is established, siddham, it is taken as form, as a complete form, nipatanat, as a nipata or by being a nipata or by simply appearing as it is. There is no further explanation. And because Panini uses it, then it's taken as correct. Another mega rule is 405. Kvachadi majjuttaranam digarasa pachaye sucham. So sometimes there is lengthening or shortening at the beginning, middle, or end vowels of a word, even before affixes. So here the important point that the rule is making is that sometimes a vowel can become long, sometimes a vowel can become short if it was long, and that can happen anywhere, basically, the beginning or the end, or even in the middle of a word. And that can happen pachaye sucha, which the commentary interprets as apachaye sucha, pachaye sucha, and both before pachayas and not before pachayas, when there are pachayas following or even when pachayas are not following. So what this rule boils down to is basically that any vowel can become long if it is short, any long vowel can become short if it is long. Again, it provides for exceptions. So this again is called a mega rule, a mahasutta. So whenever we find the problem and we don't know how to explain, say, okay, according to this rule, this can happen sometimes. The following rule, 406, it's also connected to the previous one. And not only lengthening or shortening, but there are other events that can take place unexpectedly and without any real reason. Tesu buddhi lopa agama vikara viparita desacham. So, and in those cases, previously stated, sometimes there is full grade buddhi, the vriddhi, elision or augment, modification, change, or replacement. So all these things can also happen sometimes, eventually. And these, again, we have to take as exceptions. These are exceptional cases. Finally, the fourth Mahasutta is invoked many times, for instance, in the Rupa Siddhi, to explain many verbal forms that cannot be explained otherwise. It says, Kvachi dhatu vipatti pachayanam diga viparita adesa lopagama. And it means sometimes for verbal forms that cannot be derived otherwise, that this is information that we are adding to the rule. It's understood from the context. So for verbal forms that cannot be derived otherwise, there is lengthening or change or replacement or augment of the verbal root or of the personal ending or of the affixes, the pachayas. So many things can actually happen, and they are if they cannot be explained by any other rule, they are explained away, so to say, by this rule. So the situation is more or less this. You have inside the circle the suttas, which, as you can see, some of them they overlap, some of them they don't. There are different domains. Each circle indicates a domain. The largest domain is the domain of the suttas, the grammatical rules, and outside of this big circle there are the mahasuttas, the four mahasuttas, which will provide for certain forms that cannot be achieved or cannot be derived or formed following the rules or suttas. Now, what connects these two different domains, what remains outside as an exception and what's inside as something explained by the grammar, is the rule Kaccāyana 52, which is an adhikara rule that we have seen, I think, the first day, Jina Vachana Yuttam Hi. And this adhikara is taken as a lion's gate as the way of the lion by the commentators. That means that it affects the entire grammar. All the rules that come before 52 and all the rules that come after 52. And that means that this rule applies to the words that can be derived through rules. It also applies to exceptions, because it's telling us that in this grammar, we are explaining the words that are the words of the Jina. That means the Jina Vachana, that means the speech of the Buddha Vachana. So by using this rule, we already cover all the possible situations, whether they are regular or exceptional. And there is technically no problem, because in the end, it just needs to be according to the words of the Buddha. Now, finally, we're going to see what I call the ghost method rules. And first, I chose a picture of a real ghost that was very scary, but I got the suggestion that I should change the picture. So I chose Casper, the friendly ghost, and I think that's more appropriate, because these ghost method rules are actually friendly ghosts. They are very useful and they are friendly. The ghost method rules are paribhasas that are consistently invoked or consistently used in the commentaries of the Kaccāyana and other commentaries, but that you will never see in the sutra treatise. They are never explicitly stated in the Kaccāyana itself. For instance, one of these ghost rules, you see below the reference to the Mukamatta Dipani. In the handout for today that you will find on Google Drive, there is a link if you download the handout, and you can actually download this Burmese edition of the Mukamatta Dipani. And so on page 28, line 15, 16, you can see one example of this ghost method rule. Ekam hi vattabbe ekavachanam, bahum hi vattabbe bahuvachanam. That's actually very obvious. That's something that you will say, of course, for the singular. I mean, when one thing has to be stated, when you want to express, for instance, one tree, then you use the singular endings. When you want to express trees or more than one, many trees, you will have to use the plural endings. But this is not explicitly stated in the Kaccāyana, whereas two different sets of endings, one for the singular and one for the plural, are actually given. So how do you use them? When do you use the vibhaktis for the singular, and when do you use the vibhaktis for the plural? This method rule will tell you how and why, etc. Now, interestingly, in Panini grammar, there are two rules that are equivalent to this method rule, and they are not considered method rules. They are not considered paribhashas, but simply vidis. Definition rules. They are definition of what we have to consider singular and what we have to consider plural. So as you can see, sometimes the classification of rules differs from tradition to tradition, or even from grammarian to grammarian. The reason that I call this rule a method rule, number one, is because I think it's used as a method rule. But then yesterday I found that indeed in the Sutta Nidesa it is called actually a paribhasa. It is called paribhasa. So in theory, in the Pali tradition, ekam hi vattabbe ekavachanam, bahum hi vattabbe bahuvachanam, which is used many times in the commentaries, that's a ghost method rule. It's never stated in the Kaccāyana, but it's used in order to produce the forms taught by the Kaccāyana grammar. Another, this one is also very important, method rule or ghost method rule that is not found in the Kaccāyana, but you need that in order to start to trigger the derivation process, is Vattichanupubhika Saddapatipatti. That kind of philosophical method rule means the meaning of a word is determined by the intention of the speaker. So it is the intention of the speaker, depends on what the speaker wants to say, that certain endings or certain affixes will be introduced to the base, whether it's the verbal base or the nominal base. It will always depend on the intention of the speaker. An example following the previous one, if the speaker wants to refer to a group of trees, of course, because his intention is to express many trees, he will choose the plural ending. Whereas if the speaker would decide to speak about one single tree, then he will have to use the singular endings. Another ghost paribhasa that only appears in the commentaries, in this case the Mukhamata Dipani, is Bhuttatanam Appayogo. Words whose meaning has already been stated are not used again. So this is a principle of economy, and I will not go into the details of this, but this is not an original rule from the Kaccāyana commentators. As you can see in this entry from Abhyankar's Dictionary of Sanskrit Grammar, the concept of uktarta, the word or expression whose sense has already been expressed, is already found in the Sanskrit paribhasha uktartanam aprayogaha. This is found in the great commentary on Panini, the Mahabhashya, and you can find it in the Vartikas of Kaccāyana to Panini. And as you can see below, is a very famous paribhasha that is recorded in many collections of paribhashas. So these paribhashas are in the Sanskrit tradition, at least, not in the Pali tradition as far as I know, but in the Sanskrit tradition, they are recorded in collections of maxims or paribhashas. Abhyankar called it a salutary conventional maxim against repetition of words. So a salutary conventional maxim, that means a paribhasha. As you can see then, Bimala Buddhi, the author of the Mukhamata Dipani, knows this paribhasha, and he's using that on the Kaccāyana grammar. Another ghost paribhasha that we find in Pali commentaries, not in the Kaccāyana itself, yoga vibhaga ittapasiddhi, means after the splitting up of the sutta, that means the sutta is the yoga, there is the expected result only. The full meaning of this meta rule is a little bit complicated, but sometimes, as we have mentioned before in the class, you can, if you need to derive certain words, you can split up one sutta, remove all the information that is not relevant for the derivation of a certain word, keep that information that would create a new sutta that would actually create a word that you need because it's a word that exists in the language and could not be derived otherwise. So by splitting up the sutta, you have the possibility of arriving to forms that could not be attainable otherwise. But according to this rule, you should only split a rule if afterwards the form that you will obtain is expected or desirable, is something that is actually correct. If the splitting up of a rule leads you to some incorrect form, that this splitting up, this yoga vibhaga, this division of the rule into two rules is incorrect. It's wrong. Again, as we have seen before, this concept of itta or ishta, itta pasiddhi, you can find ishta in the Dictionary of Sanskrit Grammar by Abhyankar. Below you can see that there is a very similar paribhasha in Sanskrit, yoga vibhagat ishta siddhi. It's basically the same one. It's also recorded in the Sanskrit collections of paribhasas, and this is used by Bimala Buddhi, a commentator on the Kaccāyana, in order to explain certain phenomena. Good. So now we have seen meta rules, different types of them, and we can move to the second part of the session of today. And this second part we call it rupa siddhi. That means the completion or the attaining the completion of a word. And we are going to see strings of rules in the process of derivation. So as an example, we will use etisam, that is a pronoun, and that you can see in the handout that I have shared on Google Drive. This pronominal form is achieved through Kaccāyana 63, that on the left you will see at the bottom, because that's the last rule that you apply. But before applying that rule, of course, there is a string of rules that will lead you to that situation where actually Kaccāyana 63 can work. So we start with Kaccāyana 237, and by 237, the pronoun eta is given the tag iti, that means it is a feminine, and we add the termination or the ending a, long a, instead of the short a. You can see tatta. Well, actually, you can see the full rule in the handout. This is a copy from the handout. Itiam ato apacheyo. So in the case of feminine, a replaces a. So long a replaces a. So this is the first step. And here the most important aspect of this step is that we are tagging this word. We are not simply adding the long a, but we are adding this long a as feminine, that is to say iti. So this is adding a kind of tag to the word. and this will be useful later on in the derivation. The next step is, according to Kaccāyana 320, we consider this eta, this form, as pakati. That means as a natural base to which the case endings can be added. So without this, we don't know whether this is a base that can be used for adding vibhaktis or case endings, but by applying 320, then we are somehow preparing even more the form so that it will be eligible for the reception or the taking of vibhaktis. And another rule that is preparing this form eta to be derived or to be fully formed is 603. And by this rule, eta is considered nama. Actually, eta is sabbanama, it's a pronoun, but in this case, we call it nama, and that means it can be subject to nominal derivation. So once the nominal derivation means it counts as a linga, and that leads us to a position where we know that the word eta is itti, that means it's feminine, is pakati, that's a natural base that can receive vibhaktis, and it's nama, so it can go through nominal derivation. It can get nominal vibhaktis. So we start then with the nominal derivation. The pakati or the base is eta, and through Kaccāyana 53 and 54, we add, because we want to express the locative singular, we add the locative singular case ending, which is smim. Now you'll say, well, this is wrong because the feminine cannot get smim. Okay, that's true, we'll get there. But this is the first step. We have to go step by step. First, we add the default case ending, which is smim. Then we have eta and smim. Now, by Kaccāyana 60, the a endings, which are feminine, are termed ga. So the technical term ga is added, again, as a tag to the words that end in a, and they are feminine. So from now onwards, this eta, this base, is receiving the tag ga. And that will become useful or productive once we move to the next step in the string of rules, which is Kaccāyana 179. And as you can see, it says ga pato smim sanam samsa. So that is a rule that affects to those words tagged with ga and tagged with pa. And in our case, eta has the tag or the marker ga. It's a ga form. Therefore, in the ga forms, so as the translation says, after any pronoun receiving the technical term ga or pa, smim is replaced with sam, and sa is replaced with sa. So you can see the locative ending smim is replaced with sam, and the dative genitive ending sa is replaced with sa. Here, our situation was that eta, which is a ga form, plus smim, locative singular. Because it is a ga form, this smim will be replaced with sam, and then we get eta sam, right? I hope we are not lost. Maybe I will get lost at some point. But, good. So we are here. We are almost done with the formation of the word, but there's yet another rule that we have also seen, which is Kaccāyana 61, sagamo se. And that rule, as you probably remember, provides for the augment or the insertion of an S, the sound S, before the case ending. Before the case ending, when this case ending is here it's actually the original one is for the sixth case ending, but in this case we add the S before sam, and we obtain the form etas sam for the sixth case ending. Yeah. So there, in the commentary, actually he should probably mention some other rules, but the insertion of S comes from Kaccāyana 61. And then we would have the form etas sam with double S, which is correct already. But there is an option to this one, which is the final one, the 63, that says that the ending a of pronouns eta and ima is replaced with e. So from eta sam, we obtain eti sam. That means etisam. So that's the complete form is achieved. It's a little bit circuitous, so to say, it's a little bit long. If you ask me how I know how to do it and how many steps have to be taken, as you can see, I've been just following the commentary, the Mukhamata Dipani, and the commentator is going to tell me how to proceed. Obviously, the commentator is someone who knows the Kaccāyana by heart and he knows how to combine and how to activate the relevant rules in order to attain the formation. So you can see also that in the numbers of the rules that are activated for the formation of this word are not in sequential order. We start with 237, then jump to 320, jump to 603, then go back to 53 and 54, then go to 60, then jump to 179, then go back to 61, and then go to 63. So that's how it works when we know the grammar by heart. And finally, as the last part of today's session, which is the last session of the course, I was planning to see a case study, or at least examine a little bit how grammar is used outside grammar, and how authors that write commentaries on works that have nothing to do with grammar use the grammatical works such as the Kaccāyana in order to analyze the text. So the case study here, it was for my convenience, of course, about the Patimokkha Visodhana, which is a text that I have been studying a little bit. And as the title indicates, is about the Patimokkha. That means it's about the Vinaya rules, the monastic code. Visodhana means a purification. And the Patimokkha means Patimokkha. Now one could ask here, well, is it a purification of the Patimokkha in the sense that the monks will practice very well and become very pure in terms of the practice of Patimokkha? Well, not exactly. It's about the Patimokkha as a text. So this is the Patimokkha Visodhana is a commentary on the Patimokkha, which actually is revising the text itself of the Patimokkha. And you can say, well, then it's a kind of grammatical text then, because it's, or a philological text, because it's only discussing the grammatical points of the Patimokkha. Yes, but no also. No, because the reason that the author of the Patimokkha Visodhana is using these grammatical discussions is because the intention seems to be to purify the text and remove all the errors so that the recitation of the Patimokkha will be correct. And that's a very important aspect of the Patimokkha itself. The Patimokkha is a text that is recited every fortnight. So reciting it well is very important. And to recite it well, the text has to be corrected and edited and purged of all mistakes. So this is the context. And I'm going to simply highlight a few sentences from point 3.2 about the method of analysis. So one important aspect in the approach of the Vinaya commentator when using grammar is that his default attitude, the attitude of the scholiast, of the commentator, is to treat every variant as grammatically viable, but then to select only one as correct. When I say variant here, it means the variant reading, because in this case, as in many cases in the commentarial tradition, what we call the commentators were also critical editors, so to say. They had many manuscripts in front of them on their desk or on the floor, I don't know. And they were comparing different versions of the text, and not all of them, they read exactly the same text. Sometimes there were very minor variations, and first of all, they had to be able to explain all of them. So the default attitude of the commentator is to treat every variant as grammatically viable. That means even if you have 3 different expressions of the same word in 3 different manuscripts, they will try to make sense of all of them grammatically. But that does not mean, of course, that they will accept all of them, because in the end, we understand that the author actually was using the word in only one meaning. He was not using one word in 3 different meanings, or he was not using 3 different words in one word. So in the end, he will have to select only one as correct. But as you can see, before selecting the correct reading, he will put the different variants through a grammatical analysis. Then another important point is that the author observes, in this case, in the analysis of forms in the Patimokkha Visodhana, in the text of the Patimokkha, he says in a kind of complaining that the verbal roots can take more than one meaning, but the Kaccāyana only teaches the form, not the possible meanings. He says that in the Kaccāyana grammar, a division of the meanings of the verbal roots is not made. And that is true. In the Kaccāyana, we are discussing about verbal roots, but we are never told what's the meaning of those roots and when a certain verbal root has to be applied in a certain meaning. So in the Kaccāyana, there is no semantic discussion. There is no discussion about the meaning of these roots. but just the roots themselves and the process of derivation. So here the commentator will have to resort to other types of treatises, for instance, the Saddhaniti and some commentaries on the Kaccāyana. I'm not going to go into the details here. Now, another interesting thing is that the commentator never seems tired of looking for more possible explanations. And there is a point in the discussion where when the problem seems to be already solved, and he seems to have found a solution and a proper interpretation, the commentator decides to approach it from yet a different angle, and then he starts another paragraph with the famous beginning atava, or alternatively, so there is another possible explanation. The idea here is that the role of the commentator is to explore all the possible alternatives. That's something that you have seen in Buddhaghosa, you will see in all the great commentators. They are not in a rush like many of us are to reach, no, this word has to mean this, impossible that it means anything else. First, they will try to explain all the possibilities. Only afterwards, they will decide which one makes more sense. And finally, another important point that I want to make, when we are in front of a text that is not a grammatical text, but is using the grammar, like in this case, we may find that the main purpose of the grammatical discussion is simply to establish that the word, for instance, in this case, that a certain word like Uddiseya should be written with one S, so and not with two. It's about spelling, not about meaning. So, of course, it's not about spelling, it's about spelling, not about meaning, not about the meaning as we understand. But if I can put it in this way, there is a meaning or there is a purpose in spelling things the right way. So that's what these discussions are about. Now, what usually the commentators do, like Vimala Buddhi or in the Rupa Siddhi, you will also find it. In the Saddhaniti, of course, it also has its own Dhatupata. Is this, what is called the Dhatupata, the list or text with all the dhatus of verbal roots, including the meaning or the different possible meanings of a dhatu or verbal root. This is an example of the edition of 2 Dhatupatas of the Kaccāyana tradition, edited by Dines Andersen and Helmer Smith. And on the right, you can see how it looks like, Bu Sattayam, Ku Sadde, etc. The Sanskrit Dhatupatas look more or less the same. And the idea is Bu Sattayam is telling you that the root, the verbal root Bu, is used in the sense of being Sattayam, etc. Sometimes there are more than one meaning. And this text is, you can download it online, but I have put on Google Drive my own transcription, which you can see on the right. It's exactly the same edition, but typed or retypeset. And the benefit of this typesetting it again, I did it for myself, is because then you can search. Buscar in Spanish means search. So sorry that this is in Spanish. So if you are searching for the root Bu, then you will find all the different places in the Dhatupatas where the root Bu is used, and then you can see how many different meanings it has. So that's a very important tool. It's an essential tool that we have to use when we are reading the Kaccāyana. So as you can see, apart from the rules of the Kaccāyana, then we need some paribhashas that will tell us how to interpret them. Some of them are not even taught in the Kaccāyana, but in the commentaries. Apart from that, then some commentators will have to resort to the Dhatupatas or the lists of dhatus with the meaning, because the Kaccāyana is not telling us the meaning of the verbs, and so on. So with this, I think this short introduction to Kaccāyana has reached its end. I hope it was fruitful, and I thank you all for being here, for your patience, and hope to meet you all again. Thank you very much.
Bhavatu Mangalam. Thank you so much, Aleix. That's really, really wonderful. Are you okay to take questions again?
Sure, of course.
Does anyone have any questions they'd like to ask, either in the chat or just to unmute yourself? I am afraid some people are arriving a bit late, so I'm not sure what happened there, but perhaps I could start with a question. I was really fascinated by a couple of things. One is the use of that, unlike in Panini, where we're really deriving stuff from roots, verbal roots, there's the option of deriving everything from the words of the Buddha. And this really changes things, and coupled with the rules where you can pretty much change anything, that made me think differently about some of the etymological discussions in commentaries. So Venerable Pyobaso, we were looking at the derivation of Karana. I can't remember what it was that derived from it, but it was something that has no relationship with the word Karana. And yet now I can see that with Kaccāyana we can. So yeah, so I just wondered maybe if you could say something about the difference there in derivations and what they're struggling with in needing to bring in these rules, I guess, is how I see it.
Yeah, that's a very good question. To be very honest, I cannot answer that, because in my experience, and there is a lot in the commentaries about these topics, and I have not read all these sections on paribhasas, which are very interesting. And I think if this course ends up being a short manual or an introduction to Kaccāyana, I will have to look into the details. But I was also a little bit puzzled by this, the full meaning or the full implications of these rules. And that's actually, it's something that I will have to look deeper into it, as I have done with the option markers. Because, for instance, with option markers, if you read translations of the Kaccāyana in general, they treat them very lightly. It's just, okay, they simply mean sometimes or optionally, and that's it. But then when you look at the commentaries, the commentators go deep into it, and they classify different types of option, etc. So with these paribhasas, I have the feeling also that there is more to it. And if I say something now, I probably will make many mistakes. So I will maybe we can wait until next reading session, and we can look into the commentaries. I would prefer to do that rather than, telling my own opinion, which is not very well informed at this point.
Thank you. Venerable Pyobaso, you had a question.
Well, I have seen the explanation of the Kaccāyana in English and in your previous slide, and my problem is whenever I say the grammatical explanation in Pali language, although I can find the translation in Thai language, but the thing is I want to say the English version. So I don't know if the explanation of Kaccāyana is published in English. I mean, in the English translation.
Mm-hmm. So there are a few translations that are on Google Drive. The Google Drive folder for this course contains at least three different translations into English. One by Venerable Nandisena, which is the one I usually use because it's very synthetic and very concise. The other one by Venerable Utitsana, that was published in 2016. It's also there. The PDFs are there on Google Drive. And then there is a PhD thesis by Venerable Tiap Malai, who is a fellow Thai monk, I think. And he did this PhD was not published, but recently was uploaded online. And that also contains an English translation of the full Kaccāyana grammar, together with many interesting comments and remarks. Yeah, someone is asking about the Google Drive link. I will do it immediately. 1 second.
Yeah, and I think it probably links from the TNTS site as well. So we'll check that we've put the link there up on the TNTS website, which is where the announcements are. In fact, I'll put that website up as well. Did you have anything else you wanted to ask or say, Venerable Pyobaso? So Aleix has put up the Google Drive where you can get these translations and lots of very useful information that Aleix put up. So some of us downloaded that at the beginning of the course, but actually he's put up additional very useful readings on there, so it might be worth updating. And I've just put up the Transnational Network of Theravada Studies website for this series. But you can find, so if we do have another series and you've you might want to check in and see what's advertised on that, because we'll put the information there, as well as emailing. Please don't forget to email so that we've got everybody's email address who wants to know about any future courses or sessions connected with Kaccāyana.
Yeah, sorry, I just said something, but because I didn't unmute myself. Well, I would like to go further with the reading group, because I am interested to learn more about Kaccāyana, and perhaps this will help me with my research. And as I said before, that I'm still striking with the Kaccāyana whenever I see the Pali sentence in the Kaccāyana grammar, and then I try. I couldn't understand. So the thing is, and if I can find some explanation in the Thai source or in English, so this would be very helpful.
Great. So I think, yeah, one of the ideas that we are considering is organizing a reading group and studying the verbs in the Kaccāyana, but not only the Kaccāyana, because the Kaccāyana, as we have seen, has its limitations, but also reading commentaries and going slow, comparing it with the Saddhaniti, comparing it with the Rupa Siddhi, maybe even with the Moggallana, and then also it will be a kind of workshop by which we can learn how to translate the rules or how to explain them in English, learn a little bit more about the technical vocabulary and how we can express that in English. What are the important publications that we can use? There are many. And so I think that can be very useful for students, apart from the fact that if we organize this group, then we are going to actually learn Pali grammar. So it's not like this introduction that is very theoretical. We are going to see how the Pali verbs work, and that is going to help us in reading, if I can use the term, real Pali or the canonical Pali. There are a couple of questions, I think, on the chat. Shall I read them?
Yeah, somebody just about the recording. So somebody asked about recording. Yes, so the recordings of these are all going to be on that same website that you've got there, the Theravada Studies. So if you make a note and bookmark that website, you should find the recordings there. P, have some of the recordings gone up already for this? I know we've put them up for the Friday seminar series.
Yes, so I'm going to send a link to TNT YouTube channel and also SSB YouTube channel.
Brilliant, thank you very much. And then we had another question further up from Adam. From memory, apologies, I don't recall the detail now, says Adam. In one of the scholarly papers, it mentions that the Rupa Siddhi manual sort of approaches things in a reverse way and so complements Kaccāyana. I wondered whether you had any general comments on this as to how the Rupa Siddhi gives another angle or dimension or extends the strings formed. If not, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, so this is again the article that is coming soon about optionality. One of the arguments that I make is that to achieve higher precision in the optional fields or optional domains is one of the intentions or one of the aims of Buddha Pia, the author of the Rupa Siddhi, as well as, of course, organizing the grammar topic-wise. If you look at the Rupa Siddhi, you will see the same rules that you find in the Kaccāyana, but with a different commentary, with a different Vutti, which is in many ways more clear. And also, it uses Sanskrit materials. The Rupa Siddhi is actually a very fascinating text that I have become more and more interested. And sometimes I think that if a great scholar like Helmer Smith, instead of editing the Saddhaniti, he would have edited the Rupa Siddhi, maybe we would consider the Rupa Siddhi the greatest Pali grammar instead of the Saddhaniti. In many ways, they overlap. And probably the Rupa Siddhi is older, so it's the Saddhaniti that is taking materials from the Rupa Siddhi. Apart from reorganizing the rules in a way that they are easier to combine for the strings of derivation, although they are the same rules, and in overall, Buddha Pia is respecting the Kaccāyana, just organizing it a little bit different so that it becomes easier. But apart from that, he introduces a lot of information in the commentary including translations into Pali of lost Pali grammars, which are in turn translations or Pali adaptations of very famous Sanskrit works of grammar, like the Vakyapadiya or Bhartrhari. So you find a lot of philosophy of language, for instance, in the Rupa Siddhi, in the stanzas that he gives, and also, as I said before, the establishing of the limits of the range of operation of the rules is more precise than in the Kaccāyana or even in the Mukhamatadipani. So the Rupa Siddhi is very good because it gives you more precision, so to say, than the Kaccāyana. It's still a kind of they call it a recast of the Kaccāyana. It changes a little bit the order of the suttas. The topics are easy to identify in different sections, and I think in Myanmar and other countries they prefer to read the Rupa Siddhi rather than the Kaccāyana, because the Rupa Siddhi is in a way what a good teacher or how a good teacher would teach you the Kaccāyana. That's my understanding.
Thank you, Aleix. Tony, did you want to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah,
thank you.
So I almost don't even know how to ask this question, but so you have the rules, the few, I don't know if they were the mega rules or the ghost rules, where it basically said, if all else fails, expect the unexpected. And I'm just wondering, I mean, how does that kind of not undermine the whole system? And is that in reference to non-Pali words that make it into the canon that just really don't seem to lend themselves to any of the grammatical analyses? And then the other kind of part of that question is what's preventing somebody from I'm just thinking of like myself being a lazy student and being, it must just be one of those words that I can't properly apply the rules to. So is it when all else fails, then you apply this rule? Is that how it works? Or when do you know when you can apply these rules? Sorry, I'm kind of rambling a little bit, but.
Yeah, I think that would be the point. My interpretation of this is the following. The design of these grammatical treatises is based on the contrast between general and particular. So you want to use rules that are as general as possible, and then because in general all words in the Tipitaka are explainable, they are possible to explain by the rules, so you explain them. But of course there are exceptions within the general rules, and then there are exceptions to the system itself. So there are exceptions, there are words that cannot be explained even through the exceptions to the general rules. But these are very few, and these are simply some words in the Tipitaka, maybe because they come from Sanskrit. I don't think that's usually the case. It would be rather the opposite. The words that come from Sanskrit, because the Kaccāyana is based on Sanskrit models, they're probably going to be easier to derive. But some Middle Indic forms maybe escape the skills of the grammarians. They cannot understand the historical evolution of the word, maybe. And then in those cases, then they will say, well, because the word appears in the Tipitaka, you cannot say that it's wrong. But because it cannot be analyzed through the rules of grammar, you cannot say that it is, you cannot explain it in this way or another way. Then what you do is say, well, why don't we treat it as we treat the word cha, for instance? The word cha means and. How do you derive this word? It's not possible. It's just a nipata. It's a nipata, or the word api. It's meaningful. It's correct. It's grammatical. Everything. It belongs to this group of words that are called nipatas. So what you do is when you don't know what to do or how to arrive at the particular form that is used and that is meaningful, it's real, then you put it in the category of nipatas. And that's a kind of device that they do for very few cases. If that would happen all the time, then we would have a problem. But because it's a very exceptional situation, then or marginal, then I think the system does not collapse.
Thank you very much.
So following on from that, Aleix, how does it work for, in the later centuries when Pali is being used more broadly, not just to interpret the Tipitaka. Does that make the grammar easier because it's, you know, borrowing on Sanskrit mainly, or does that make it more challenging to use the grammar in relation to new Pali?
Well, that's one of these great questions that we are having here in the question and answer. That will be a PhD project, like other questions that you have been asking. To my knowledge, there is no research published on that. It's even studying grammar is a very specialized or marginal field in Pali, and these topics are many people who teach the Kaccāyana or who teach Pali grammar, they simply want to teach beginners how to read the Tipitaka, and people don't look at the problematic sides. But as you say, then when you start reading commentaries, some of the works that are called, for instance, the Kaccāyana Sara, which is a minor work I'm going to translate soon, it was written in Myanmar, and as the title indicates, is the essence of the Kaccāyana. It's very short. I think it has 72 stanzas. But if you read that, in many ways, it has nothing to do with the Kaccāyana. It has to do with methods of interpretation and what you understand as the qualifier and qualified. There are elements of the philosophy of language and so on. So that area, I think, has not been properly studied. And some of the explanations that you find in these so-called grammatical texts are useful only if you then want to read another commentary on the Kaccāyana and you want to understand the Mukhamata Dipani, and then you read the Mukhamata Dipani to understand the Kaccāyana, and you read the Kaccāyana to understand the Tipitaka. So there's a very complex relationship between these commentaries and these grammatical works, and not all of them, they have the same purpose. That's why, according to my understanding, we have preserved so many different small grammatical treatises. They all look, prima facie, they look the same. It's like, it's very short, it's called Kaccāyana Sara. It's very short, it's called Kaccāyana Veda, or the Karika. And they are short grammars. But if you look into details, every one of them, they are trying to focus on one specific issue, and they try to give you the tools for the interpretation of other treatises and so on. So that, as I say, it's a vast literature. There are many, many grammatical works and commentaries on these works. And then there are commentaries on other works that use grammatical terminology. And yeah, to my understanding, there's not enough scholarship on that to reach a conclusion right now. But it's a fascinating topic, I feel, because it's like 1,000 years of scholarship on Pali grammar that needs to be explored.
Thank you. Yeah, it makes me think of, I can't remember which later Pali text it was, but Sven Bredfeldt published a Pali text, and it was a relief for me because the Pali he's looking at there is in a way similar to Sinhala in structure.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of absolutism. Well, it's like going from Sanskrit to Hindi, going from Pali to Sinhala, and yeah, so it makes me wonder what their relationship with grammar was at that time to make those shifts. We are running over, so perhaps we should all say thank you now to Aleix. And it does just occur to me that Aleix, as the teacher, you now get to choose your diksha from the students. You can say anything, what we have to do. Thank you.
Well, yeah, thank you very much, everyone. And yeah, hopefully, I mean, we'll keep you posted if you can follow the website of the Transnational Network of Theravada Studies. In a few weeks, probably we will come up with some plan, and feel free to send emails to us with suggestions, feedback, and so on. And that's all. Thanks a lot, and hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Aleix. It's really, really been great.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Professor Aleix.
Thank you.
Professor Kate, to you as well. Thank you so much.
And thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Thank you.
Now, I still don't know why so many people were interested in Kaccāyana. We only had a few people tell us, so I'm really curious as to the reasons for others.
Okay.